What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and thank you for joining us to the Hot Breach podcast. With me as always is Prodigio Pete, but sadly Get Flanked cannot make it today. He is traveling on business. Nevertheless, we have the perfect replacement for him today. If you follow Rainbow Six Siege, there is virtually no way that you don't know this man. He is the fastest news source in the north, I would say. And you'll also know him from his Mythbusters series. It is, of course, CoreRoss. Ross, how's it going?
Hey, guys. Nice intro. Thanks for that.
Yeah, not at all. And, of course, if by some miracle you don't actually know Ross, he does... I'm going to say probably the main YouTube news channel or news source for Rainbow Six. Like literally within minutes of news going live, you can find in-depth videos on CoreRoss's channel, and that is on youtube.com/CoreRoss. Or of course, if you're focused just on Rainbow Six, there's also youtube.com/6news. That's the number 6 and news. So do go and check those channels out if you don't know them yet by some miracle. I don't know how you would manage that.
Right, so before we just crack on with the podcast, a very quick word for our sponsor, Massdrop, who have been kind enough to help us out on this podcast. And in particular, a word for the PC37X by Sennheiser, an exclusive product on Massdrop. A headset that I've been using now for about 3 months, on and off with the other headsets that Massdrop provided us. And Sennheiser is a product very close to my heart. Before we had this deal with Massdrop, I was using the PC373D, which is a very, very similar headset to this, a very comfortable headset that I could highly recommend to you. I know Rogue wants to talk a little bit about this one.
Yeah, I mean, everyone who's been watching my individual gaming streams will have noticed that I've been using these pretty much consistently for the past few months. And one of the things I really like about them is that they do come with the integrated microphone, which works quite well. Obviously, we also have a sponsorship with Massdrop for the AKG K7XXs, and those come without a microphone. So there's always a bit of the trade-off. But Sennheiser definitely have done a great job with these. And yeah, I've been very happy with them.
Yeah, Sennheiser is a name that's synonymous with really high-quality audio products. So I think that's definitely what you're getting with this headset.
And if you are interested, just one last thing, there is a link in the top of the description and also displayed on screen now. So just go ahead and have a look if you are sort of in the market for getting yourself a new headset.
Thank you very much to Massdrop. So, welcome and thank you for joining us. Topics for today. It's great that you're joining us, actually, because we have quite a lot of news to discuss. There is Rainbow Six news with the reverse friendly fire finally going live, and I know you've covered that on your channel, so let's discuss that a little bit. There's a few other bits of news. There's a lot of people now mentioning there's on PlayStation 4 a shield glitch. We can maybe quickly talk on that, although I do know that I think you're mainly Xbox players, both of you, right? But nevertheless, we'll mention that. There's the Pro League prize pool increase, which has been announced. Quick discussion of that. Before we then get on to our main topic for today, which is Ghost Recon Breakpoint. We've had a lot of news and information go live about that game, and we'll get to discussing that. Before then, in the end, maybe moving on to our new traditional topic right now, our recurring topic of Game of Thrones, and then some Pro League news. There's, of course, the finals in Milan this weekend, which we'll discuss, and also there have been relegations in all of the major Pro League regions. So, those are the topics for today.
There'll be fair warning about the Game of Thrones stuff as well, so don't worry if you haven't seen it. We're not going to discuss it yet. A few people just joining late asking where Flanked is. Look, we just didn't think it was working out. So, CoreRoss was available. And his fee wasn't that big, so, we negotiated and we got him in, all right?
Yes, it is no longer April, Pete. You can't get away with these things. Like I mentioned, Flanked is traveling. He's traveling on business which you may or may not hear about soon. Wink, wink. That's all I can say. That's all I will say. I'm being naughty here. I can't tell you. Nevertheless, let's start out on our first topic, the big topic for Rainbow Six this week. It is, of course, reverse friendly fire going onto the live servers. So if you're watching this on YouTube or, of course, live right now, let me get you that on the screen.
So I was just saying before we went live that I wanted to test this bad boy out and see what it was like. But then I went into a live server and I just had this pang of guilt. I just couldn't find it in myself to start shooting friendlies just to see,
That's why you need your Smurf account to be named so that no one recognizes you and you go in and test it.
I've got my own logo, right? So I'll get found out pretty quick if I go around tapping people in the foot.
Yeah, and can you not do it in custom games now as well? I think
I tried literally like half an hour ago. I tried to test in a custom game. It wasn't on by default, and I checked the whole settings twice to see if there's a setting there, and it's not there. So
that was handy in the test server for sure.
Yeah, that's
it's not there for live.
For any change, it's always great. Especially for us, for people like us, when we want to actually find out how it works and then speak about how it works, is if we can do it in the sort of custom games. But yeah, not this feature. I don't know if that's planned. If there'll maybe be an option in future that you can switch it on, it would be nice. But then again, I suppose it's not that important, because if you are going into a custom match, there's a very high likelihood that it's people you know somehow or you're connected to, and you won't have a problem with purposeful toxicity anyways. So I get why it's not in there right now.
You could just imagine it in Pro League.
Someone accidentally shoots one of their teammates and then gets a penalty.
Not forgiven.
No forgiving, yes. So anyway, this has now gone live. So let's go over the features of reverse friendly fire. We've spoken about it before, but there have been some changes. There is a handy infographic, although I think it is worth going over that. This lists basically the effects of friendly fire. Now, any weapons that is primary or secondary weapons, so any of the rifles, shotguns, machine guns, you name it, pistols, it doesn't matter, all of those weapons are covered under the reverse friendly fire system. So you can damage your teammates before it goes active, but once it does go active, the damage is reflected from there. Now, one thing that has changed since I tested the system, certainly, is that it no longer requires an actual team kill before the friendly fire becomes active, but it only requires a certain amount of damage. Now, as we said, it's not on the test server, it's not on the custom matches, so I haven't actually been able to test how much damage it is exactly. I'm guessing it's maybe 100 or equivalent to a team kill if you start doing that, but I'm not fully sure. Do either of you have a guess, or?
I have no idea.
I don't, and I think it'd be best if we actually don't ever find that out, just so people can't take advantage of it in some way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm guessing if someone wants to know, sooner or later they will find out simply by doing it.
Yeah, you know it.
But there
maybe a reason that it's not in custom as well.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think it is definitely a step forward that it activates after a certain amount of damage rather than just a team kill, because there's always then the concern that someone picks Caveira and it just goes around downing everyone, or just does damage to every team member by shooting the leg and then not killing them, and it just never activates. So now it accumulates damage, it calculates the damage, and eventually it will activate once you do enough damage. Now... Yeah, go ahead.
No, go on. I was just going to say I'm still a little bit confused with this very fancy graphic.
Yeah,
but I'm looking forward to understanding it. You know, being in the company of two great minds like you two, and I know I'm going to come away from this podcast having a clear and full understanding of how this works.
Okay, so far so good, right? Primary weapons, secondary weapons, that makes sense, right? Okay, I'll take that as a yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So the next section is on unique gadgets and throwable objects. And this is all about direct hits. So, of course, there are unique gadgets like Buck's shotgun. Yes, it's a gadget, but actually it's just a shotgun. So it works just like the guns. And of course, you have other things like the blowtorch that Maverick uses. Again, it works like a firearm, so it will eventually activate the damage. And once reverse friendly fire is activated, it will reflect onto you, as will any direct strike from basically any other gadget. And listed here are Maverick, Buck, Ash, that's Zofia, Tachanka, Nomad, and Mozzie, there we go.
It should be noted as well that although Zophia's there, that's direct hits from her stun grenades hitting you, doing 10 damage, and not the explosive ones. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, we'll get to explosives after that. And yes, there is, it's I think the same counts for Ash. So Ash hitting you directly, like, I think it does about, is it 50 damage exactly when you get hit by one of the projectiles?
It's 10 damage if you get a direct hit, but if it hits something nearby and explodes, I think it's 50 damage.
Okay.
I believe.
Yeah, I'd have to double check the numbers as well. I did test it once, but yes, the explosion is explosive damage, I think similar to a hand grenade, or maybe a breaching charge, actually. Maybe breaching charge makes more sense, but if you get hit by the projectile itself, it of course doesn't blow up, it just bounces off, and that damage does fall under this. So any kind of damage you get from these gadgets that sort of strike you works exactly the same as firearms, basically. It will eventually activate the reverse friendly fire, and once it becomes active, it will reflect the damage, and there will be no damage to teammates. So far, so good, right?
Yeah.
Now, explosives, and this is where where it does become fun, I guess.
Yeah.
So again, we have some of the operators here listed again. Ash is listed again. And then we also have Smoke, Capitao, and Fuse. And there are three distinctions, basically. So you have gadgets that result in an explosion, such as impact grenades, hand grenades, nitro cells, and they've also listed here breaching charges. Now, that can't be right, because shouldn't breaching charges work just like the breaching charges for Thermite and Hibana? That's odd, because the way these explosives are supposed to work, they do not damage and will not impact RFF.
Well, I would say a thermite charge, you've got a warning noise and a time to get away before it explodes. Whereas someone could come up behind you, slap down a breaching charge and detonate it, to blow you up. So maybe it's a bit quicker. Maybe it could be used by someone trolling.
Yeah. I suppose I should start off with the overall explanation for explosives. They do, before you have RFF active, they do damage to teammates, and they can also activate the RFF, with an asterisk here, for many of them. And after, they still damage teammates, and they do not deal reverse damage. And the reason for this is potential strategies around a suicide, a sacrifice, right? I think the main source of concern, I would say, is probably Fuse, because if Fuse or the player playing as Fuse in any given round, if they before then commit a team kill, which is not forgiven, or get enough team damage that is not forgiven, reverse friendly fire becomes active, and then if a Fuse places a charge above the objective room, they could theoretically just blow the whole place up as the remaining 4 players of the team charge in, and of course they are immune, or if reverse friendly fire worked in that way, they would be immune, and they could then wreak havoc, and only the Fuse would die. To avoid anything like that, all these kind of area of effect or explosive gadgets, such as Smoke, such as the firebolts for Capitao, and of course Fuse, and any other things like hand grenades and the like, they're basically not caught by the friendly fire, in that once it's active, you can still team kill your teammates, and there won't be a reflection, just to avoid these kinds of sort of sacrificial strategies emerging, which would be ludicrously game-breaking, and they're not intended at all.
Dom is in my chat, just to confuse it a bit further, saying that the exception of the cap can trap.
Yes, there are exceptions.
But he says he's had a warning, so it says that these explosives don't trigger RFF, but he's had the warning on screen for a teammate that was too close to one that was triggered.
Nice.
So
okay, yes, that leads us actually to another good point. There are exceptions, of course. Now, the gadgets that you can use to actively kill or team kill are excluded from RFF once it's active, except for, and there are now basically exceptions to the exceptions, those are meant to be Thermite's explosive charge, Hibana's charge, the cap can traps, and the mines. They are Claymore mines. So the Claymores as well. And those make sense because A, these gadgets can't really be used to troll teammates, so you don't really need that as a defense. And B, if you place a Claymore or a Capcan trap somewhere, and then half a round later one of your friends actually gets too close, or one of your teammates, and then it gets triggered, that might not even be your fault. Not only is it not intentional or very hard to use intentionally, but it's completely not your fault. And if someone then gets blown up in there and goes ahead and says that was intentional, then you get punished. So that is silly, and that's why it makes sense to have those excluded, except for the fact that apparently they're not quite working as intended.
Okay.
So far, so good. Now, here's one thing, and Ross, I saw you mention that in your video as well.
Yeah.
The second exception basically here, explosives currently will damage teammates while under RFF, as I explained before, to avoid sacrificial sort of strategies, but this will be changed in Year 4, Season 2, which is interesting because...
It is so interesting, yeah.
That means really that they have to do some more changes to avoid these sacrificial changes, these sacrificial strategies, while still being able to have reverse friendly fire. Like, how do you see that working?
I've been trying to rack my brain around how they would do it, and the only thing I've come up with so far that works is, like, say you fuse an objective. Fuse would die, obviously, but your teammates inside would maybe get knocked down or something, kind of like a Nomad thing where they get, immobilized and they can't do anything for a couple of seconds, just so you can't use it as like a tactic.
Yeah.
And that could work with frag grenades as well, but that's the only thing I've come up with so far that would work.
Maybe a blinding effect, maybe like flashbangs, so that you're blind while you're in there.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
Then somehow vulnerable to any of the enemy that stay alive. It's an interesting problem, and it's interesting to say that this, because when I made my first video, when this system first went onto the test server, I tested a little bit, and I actually had some feedback from one of the developers about some of the assumptions I'd made, and he specifically explained to me the reason why explosives don't work is because of the sacrificial strategies. So it's interesting that it is intentional, but lower down in the patch notes, I think it mentions that it's not intentional. Here we go. Further down it says, explosives currently will continue to damage teammates even under RFF. This is not intended and will be fixed in Season 2. Well, surely it is intended to avoid the sacrificial strategies, but I guess maybe it means that the intention is to somehow counter those strategies anyway, and then not then be able to include these weapons in the RFF.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, I can't wait to see what they do.
Yeah, for sure.
And even though it's Season 2, I don't kind of expect it till like maybe mid-season as well. I don't expect to get with the launch, but who knows? Maybe we will.
Yeah, I mean, we'd almost have to hear about it basically this Sunday, right? If it was going to go live at the beginning.
Yeah. That's true. And why would you just wait a few weeks? Well, I suppose the TTS will last 2 to 3 weeks anyway, won't it? So even if we're going to get a reveal this week, it could still be a good month before the new season launches. Listen to this. Mr. Dobbs in my chat. Do you guys think that the recent change to the revive health mechanic was done to avoid issues when trying to reset someone and getting reverse damage? So do you think that this was put in place, this reduced health that you revived to, because of this? Like they were just putting that in place ahead of time?
Do you want to speculate, Ross?
Even if that was the case, you could still jump off something to down yourself. Jump off the roof or something. I think there'd still be quite easy ways to do it without having to have someone shoot you. Which was already a silly thing anyway. So yeah, I don't know. There
was never really an explanation as to why the change was made, the resetting change was made, right? I mean, it makes sense that shooting your friend to then heal them and give them more health afterwards, it never made any sense from a sort of realism perspective. even though I guess within the game it did provide a sort of an interesting tactical choice. You'd have to take 2 players out of the match for 10 seconds or whatever. You'd have to stay somewhere safe. They're vulnerable while they're doing it. You have to judge your shot, get them down, revive them. There's risk involved. And then you can take that risk to sort of get a little bit of reward and have someone with a bit more health able to fight again. Yeah, I'm still sort of split on whether I liked it or not, or whether I like it going away or not, really.
I've quite enjoyed it, just because it does seem a bit odd to come back with full health after getting downed. Come back with, with 20 does sound much more believable.
I think it was just a head scratcher, because I suspect that there was another reason behind it other than the fact that they wanted to reduce the health you came back on, and perhaps that was it. Perhaps there was something going on.
Yeah, we know like new operators take 9 months to make, so if there is a attacker healer in the works, like that would totally match up for later this year. But we'll never know until we get there.
Yeah,
that's true. There might never be.
Yeah, as it is, it probably was a buff for Doc, or at least sort of an indirect buff, because now Doc is more valuable. The ability to be able to give health back to someone who's just come out of a gunfight, he still has that. And before you could still reset, now you can't. So it kind of has made him more valuable, for sure.
Definitely.
Let's have a look at the final section of this lovely infographic, drones and cams. So unique drones and cameras, that would be Twitch drone, or of course Mozzie taking over drone, and then of course Maestro's camera. They can damage teammates and can activate RFF, and then once it's active, the reverse damage is dealt, but it is dealt onto the drone and the camera. So this was something that I think was intended, I think, when it went on the test server the first time, although it didn't quite work this way. I'm assuming that at this stage it has been fixed and works exactly this way. So if you use a Twitch drone to shoot someone or shoot something, the drone gets destroyed, and the same with the cameras. So I think, it's mostly the explosives that are a little hard to wrap your head around.
And for that one, it's certainly interesting, because obviously if you have a Twitch drone and you try to destroy one of your teammates' drones, it'll do the reverse friendly fire too. So it's definitely quite an interesting thing, not being able to destroy someone's gadget on your team with Twitch drones and Maestro turrets. Yeah, that's so when I tested it, the very first iteration, shooting a drone as a Twitch drone destroyed the Twitch drone, although as Maestro, in the very first iteration, you could still destroy the gadgets of your teammates. I don't know if that was intentional or if that's been changed, but it would make sense to be consistent. So I'm hoping they've changed that. Yeah, I'd hope so too. But yeah, I've not tested that either.
So if I start shooting you with a Maestro Evil Eye, it won't damage me. It will just destroy the Evil Eye, or once the reverse friendly fire is active. So if you haven't done anything yet and you start shooting someone, you start zapping someone, it will accumulate the damage. If you manage to commit a team kill with your Evil Eye, first of all, congratulations, that's quite a feat. But if you do manage it, then yes, it will become active, and then every shot you do will actually reverse the damage onto the turret itself. Just to add a little bit more confusion, let me wind this back. Actually, is it further down? I think it mentions, yes. So if I go down to the text where it tries to explain basically the same thing we've just discussed, there's one thing that I find interesting as well. It's under impacts for weapons and thrown objects. It says the mounted LMG will activate and reflect damage, but then it says in parentheses, Tachanka, semicolon, regardless of who is using the turret. Now, I'm assuming what that doesn't mean is that if Tachanka puts down a turret and Jaeger jumps on, that Tachanka gets punished for the team kill. That's what it reads like, though. That's definitely not it, because it says regardless. That's weird. I think that is the I was going to say concern or confusion that they were trying to clear up and inadvertently
made it worse.
Yes, basically, because logically we need to test it, but I would be stunned if that was the case, man. I mean, that would have some hilarious consequences, you know.
It has to just be a normal machine gun, and whoever's using it gets punished.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Even though
if
kind
it
of
works
says...
the other way, that's quite fun. That's another nerf Tachanka.
Anyone uses Tachanka, you can get griefed easily. Then it just cannot be.
What if you hop on Tachanka's turret? Say this was true, and it isn't, right? But what if you hopped on his turret but shot him? Then who's it reversed him to? just to make things a bit more
make like a black hole or something.
Yeah. This weird paradox.
Well, I did see a tweet literally sort of half an hour ago that all the servers are currently, the Rainbow Six servers are currently experiencing trouble. Maybe someone did that.
Maybe someone
exactly
did that. Yeah.
The servers are going down.
Do you know, the thing about all this stuff is, you know, if it's, you know, like, I'm sure it is necessary. I mean, we had Shadow on recently, and, you know, it's eye-opening the amount of crappy behavior, and, like, I'm just being aware of it myself, just playing Rainbow Six Siege, and I wouldn't even say it's toxicity, but there's like an immaturity level in the community. That, you know, it's a fairly significant minority of people that are doing it. And it's just a shame because, like, honestly, I'd prefer not to have these changes come in like this. And it is kind of convoluted to understand a little bit, you know, especially, you know, anyone new coming into the game explaining all this. And I quite liked how it was, but it's sort of, I almost feel like this is something we brought upon ourselves, you know, as a community with our behaviour. It's like you are our parents and we're all being chastised for our behaviour. It's like, you know, because obviously I wish we didn't have to bloody understand all these charts and asterisks and triple asterisks and, you know, but just seems that that's what we've brought upon ourselves, really.
I'm sure, and Ross, you probably remember this better than me, I'm sure right at the beginning there were no team kill penalties at all, right? Did you?
I'm pretty sure there was nothing to begin with at all.
And then that was just a consequence of team killing. Then eventually we had sort of the auto kick function, and then eventually we had temporary bans, which were actually relatively recent. Were they last year at some point that they brought in the temporary bans that became longer and longer every season, the more team kills you committed?
That's right, yep.
So it's just been this sort of escalation with the way the game was meant to be played, where there's always the risk of accidentally shooting your teammate, but it should always be an accident. It's always intended to be an accident, and then realizing, oh, hang on, no, this is also something you can use when you get annoyed at someone, or when someone walks in front of you, someone reinforces the wrong wall or does something, you can shoot them, and then it just escalates from there.
To be fair, though, just to go back on what I said a moment ago, I don't get TK'd a lot. It's not every time I play or anything like that. I just think there's a general, you see it in the chat and in the voice comm sometimes, there's like a general immaturity, you know. But maybe that's just the competition and people's egos getting in the way when they mess up.
I've been playing solo ranked this weekend quite a lot, and I'd say 90% of the games there was team kills. There was at least 2 or 3 games where 3 people in the enemy team had reverse friendly fire on because they were team killing.
In ranked,
yes. Yeah, and that's ranked, yeah. And I read a post on Reddit just the other day where there was a guy complaining about the new system, and he was saying, oh, this is a horrible system because I team kill on accident 2 to 3 times every single game, he would say. And he said it was never his own fault because other people ran in front of him. I'm thinking, yep, definitely your fault.
CoreRoss, I've got this guy, I don't play with him so much anymore, not because we fell out or anything, he's just playing other games, but swear to God, he was that guy that was always team killing you and always injuring you. And it was accident, but he's just so careless. He would be the one shooting a drone and he would wipe you out. And it wasn't like, twice a year. It was every single time you played, he would TK one of you by accident or take you down to 40 health. And yeah, it's really frustrating.
Well, that's the thing. I think that goes away with experience, because I know
he's quite a good player.
I had to change my play style. I mean, I've been playing first-person shooters since GoldenEye, so I have a lot of experience as well. And nevertheless, I noticed when I started playing Rainbow Six that my behaviors changed, not so much of course in my actual shooting, but just in the positions I put myself in. Like you mentioned, chasing drones, I'm more careful. Like if a drone gets away, that's fine. First priority is not shoot my teammates. And things like when you're peeking a corner and someone comes and joins you, and this is like, do you really want to fight here? Okay, come, you do it, and I'm going. I'm just leaving, not standing in behind someone or in front of someone, because you know what? At some point, something's going to go wrong, and just let him have that fight, and I'll go and do my own thing, or I'll wait for you to die, and then I'll re-peek and get that refrag from there. So I think it's part just changing your behaviors, and in terms of sort of what you mentioned, like there being a competitive aspect to Siege, and people then get invested and maybe get a bit emotional and angry and annoyed and then take it out on teammates or take it out in chat. I think, sure, the competitive aspect is probably a factor in that. But then again, what we also have to remember is we're dealing with an online game, and just everything online has the problem of toxicity, if you want to label it that. The anonymity of being on the internet, whether it is any video game, or if it's just a comment section or anything like that, people's behaviors always change when you can hide behind that username. And as long as that's a thing, there's always going to be a problem with that in games. And I think actually, in a way, if you think about it, video games are maybe at the forefront of trying to somehow curb those behaviors compared to other online services where it's maybe more long-winded and you have to wait until someone does something really bad and then you have to report them and maybe they'll get banned or maybe not. And I agree with you probably. It's a shame that we now have to have this convoluted and nonsensical system, right? Friendly fire doesn't ever reflect. That's not how it works, but that's how we have to have it in the game now to be able to play it. And it's actually surprising to hear that even on Ross, were you playing on Xbox or?
That was Xbox.
Xbox. Okay, then that makes a little bit more sense, because on PC I rarely experience someone actively being that nasty towards me. It happens, but not very often at all. But yes.
Yeah, I don't know as well if they were being nasty or if it was just, carelessness as well.
Okay.
Testing the system.
It's quite, because I certainly wasn't aware of what they were doing it for, so it could have always been mistakes. Because I do wonder about new players coming in with this new system, if they feel punished by it or if they just accept, oh yeah, I shot a teammate, it's okay. I think how a new player takes it.
Sorry, I think the intention is that it's meant to be good for them, though. That it's meant to be better for new players getting exploited by, groups of friends picking on them in games and making a fool out of them. There's a lot of frustration tends to be against new players. Oh, you should have known this or done this. A Shadow, when we had her on, was talking about, this expectation of, well, you shouldn't be playing the game if you're not good enough. It's like, how do you get good at the game if you don't bloody well play it? But on the thing about anonymity, there's been a lot of sort of research into that and what people will do, and people basically do things they would never do without anonymity. I mean, Darren Brown, and I don't know how true this is to actual clinical studies, but he did this thing where he had this studio audience and they were voting on what happened to this guy who was just an actor, but the studio audience didn't know that. And then through the night, they had these two buttons and they could vote for something positive to happen to this guy who was being secretly filmed, but he was an actor, or something negative. And every choice they got, it was always something negative. Like the boss phoning him, telling him he's lost his job, getting abducted in the street and thrown into the back of the van. And because they were all anonymous in the audience, they were like, yeah, this will be fun. But I mean, it's just one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah. Another thing is that this will never be a perfect system. Like, it's very easy for, say, a 3-stack of players to go in and troll one person. They can each kill that person 3 different rounds with no reverse friendly fire and still troll perfectly fine with even this system in place. So It's definitely not perfect, but I don't think there ever will be a perfect solution.
Yeah, I agree with that. As it stands, as a sort of going with everything we have up until now already, we have the auto kick eventually, and then the time penalties if you get auto kicked after team killing. You put this on top as an additional layer. I think it improves the situation. It helps improve the situation. But yeah, it can't ever be perfect, I think, especially once you get two teams working together. Righty-ho. Let's maybe talk very briefly. I don't know if you've heard about this shield glitch. I think there was supposed to be also maintenance literally right now today, which has been postponed. But there is a sort of a bit of a glitch that I've seen a lot of people struggling with, specifically with Clash. When she switches from her shield to her gun, she keeps her shield up. Have you guys seen that or heard of it?
I haven't, but I'm not surprised by it. You know,
I've not seen it in game yet, but yeah, I've heard about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, from what I've seen, it seems to be mainly focused on PlayStation. So hopefully the planned maintenance for today is addressing that, and we'll get to see that fixed.
Is it a bug that happens, Rogue, or is it someone intentionally glitching?
I believe this is, as I understand it, and I've not played PlayStation either, but as I understand it, it's literally just when you have the shield out and you switch to your gun, the shield stays up, or can stay up. That's how I understand it. As someone's mentioning in my chat, they have clips of it, and it's actually worse. Okay.
Yeah,
it's intentional. Okay, so it is apparently intentional.
Yeah, their maintenance did say there was no player-facing changes. So I don't know if that was just a planned maintenance or if they're actually going to fix it.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, stuff like this I think could take a little while to fix, unfortunately.
Sorry.
No, you guys.
Well, with these glitches, it's just, I just remember there's been so many that have come out, and you do this certain set of actions, and suddenly you're invulnerable, or you're invisible, or you can put a Valkyrie camera somewhere where, nobody can shoot it, and stuff like that. And some of it isn't actually a bug. It's actually people being kind of malevolent. They work this stuff out and then they spread it to their friends and stuff.
I can imagine every single patch they have a QA team who has just a list of all the previous stuff that they have to go through all over again, because this stuff keeps going back constantly.
Yeah, old ones, new ones. It's quite challenging. That actually raises a different interesting question, though, that we could also just discuss. Should players using these intentional glitches where you have to go through a set of actions and you have to purposefully do something that breaks the game and gives you an unfair advantage, should that be classified as cheating, and should they be literally punished as cheaters, or would that be problematic?
The thing is, some of those... Do you remember that invisibility one?
Mm-hmm.
Where you could just see someone's gun? It was just so prevalent. You'd be potentially banning 500,000 accounts. I'm sure it's against the terms of service. There must be something in the terms of service that says,
I'm pretty sure as well that one you could do very easily accidentally.
Yeah,
I think there's been something to do with vaulting. Yeah. There's ones that are complicated and there's ones that are really simple.
So maybe that is the one big problem, is that because these could be activated accidentally, we could have false positives and people being punished for something that they didn't mean to do.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's definitely cheating. It's definitely cheating. That's not the question. The question is whether you actually, someone that's paid $30 for the game or whatever, you actually just take that away from them and then they have to buy a new game. It depends how, hardcore you feel about it. I feel like a warning, maybe 3 strikes and you're out, or 2 strikes. You get 1 warning, do not glitch. A message pops up in game. And then but then, like you say, these things could be activated completely innocently,
And what if you didn't even realize how it happened, or some of them you might not see yourself? It's only from third person that you can see that there's something wrong with a shield or a deployable shield, and you might not even realize it, and it's just happened. If it's something that can happen easily.
One of the oldest ones, I don't know if you guys recall this, was Capcan traps. Remember they used to have the red lasers and people worked out how to glitch it so that they was invisible? And they were deadly at that point, Capcan trap. It wasn't just half your health gone. And I I had a lot of discussions with people about that. They would go, well, it's crap anyway. It's crap cans. So, I feel completely justified in doing this because, you've got the bolt and you've got the little, it's really easy to see. But then it's just that question, well, you are exploiting the game. But these have been around forever, these little tricks.
It's amazing how many there are and how they keep coming back and how new ones keep popping up. It's weird. It's too frequent, I would almost say.
It's not, obviously, the developers don't want these glitches in the game and they work hard to stop them, but it's like they're always fighting fires with this stuff.
Yeah.
Like that Capcom one, if I remember, and we're going back to year one, perhaps the first few months of the game, it was like you start to put it in, but then as you go through the animation, you stop and then you put it in, and then it won't have it was something stupid like that. And someone could easily innocently do that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, then, let's move up to our next little bit of Rainbow Six news. This is actually quite straightforward and quite a small piece of news. It is regarding the prize pools for Rainbow Six Pro League. Now, as you may remember, for the last Invitational, we had a maximum prize pool of $2 million, and the promise was that any excess to that would basically go into funding other events. And it has now been revealed that $1,069,000 extra dollars were made and have now been distributed. So Challenger League is going to go up to $73,500 per season in prize pools. Pro League will be $626,000, minors $75,000 per event, and majors $500,000. And I think Intero actually had an interesting tweet on that, in that he basically showed what it used to be. So for Pro League finals, the prize pool used to be $275,000. In fact, the Milan event that we have coming up this very weekend is still going to be $275,000. That, going on after this event, will be up to $626,000. So that's a significant increase. That's more than double. Challenger League is going from 15 to 73,500, and even bigger. That's almost 4 times the prize pool. Minors are going up by 50% from 50,000, and the majors were 350 before. So they're technically the smallest percentage increase, but still $500,000 for a major twice a year. The major is only once a year, and then we have the Invitational as the second major, right?
So, may I ask, so obviously the Challenger League, so that's just for where you finish at the end of the season in that sort of table, is it? Because they obviously don't qualify for a minor. They're not off to Milan. And then is that true with the Pro League figure as well? Or no, surely not. It can't be that much.
That's what it says. I double-checked for Milan this weekend. It is 275,000, and that is now going up to 626. Of course, that is across all of the teams that win a share of that. So the first team, what do they get? About half, and then the second and maybe gets a quarter or something like that. So it is spread out across multiple teams. It's not just the winner that takes everything.
The winner,
But still,
that'll be getting spread out quite a lot between the players and the team, the coaches, and I guess.
Do they get anything for the regular season, CoreRoss? Do they get anything for who finishes first in EU? Do you know? Because I don't.
I don't know. No clue.
Not that I know of. I think it's really just once you go to the LAN that there you can.
So how do the Challenger League get that money? Is it just broken down the table places?
I'm assuming that must be it, because really once you reach the top of Challenger League, what you then do is you either manage to take a Pro League spot or you don't, right? So I'm assuming it must be depending on your performance throughout that. Not 100% certain though. There's so much Pro League to follow. Challenger League is sadly not quite up there on my table of
there's so
expertise.
Much, isn't there?
Yeah,
it's good though to see some money coming into it, because these players, whether you watch it or not, they do work really hard, because a lot of them are holding down day jobs and then they're coming home, obviously dealing with all their family stuff, and then they may be training 4 hours, 5 hours in the evening, scrimming. So to have a bit more money there might mean that some of them can go part-time, or if they Twitch stream, they might be able to, quit their job altogether and really focus on being a pro gamer,
Yeah. I'm wondering, does this allow us to sort of estimate how valuable these sort of in-game events are? Like, for instance, the Road to 6 Invitational, because it was 30% of the Road to 6 Invitational event that went towards the prize pool, and 9% of the net revenue from Pro League item sets or Pro League items. So how much did we have? We had was it up to about $1 million for the Invitational prize pool, or maybe a bit more? And then the Road to Invitational event started? Something like that?
Yeah, but doesn't that article state it? Hang on a sec. Didn't it say half? UB put $500,000 in. Hang on, mate.
Yeah, that's the standard. Ubisoft always have put up $500,000 for the Invitational. And then for this most recent Invitational, for the first time, they also had this sort of additional funding where they take part of the profits from in-game cosmetics and channel those towards the Pro League prize pools.
Okay, so you can do that calculation because it says reaching the maximum set amount of 2 million.
Yep.
Okay, so they got to that's 1.5 million because they had the $500,000.
Yeah.
And then there was a further, let's call it $1 million left over. So that's 2.5 million. And what percentage was it you said?
So it was 30% of the Road to Invitational and 9% from the Pro League items. That's a bit tougher. You don't know how much was earlier on.
Yeah.
But I think we were almost at $1 million anyway before the Road to 6 Invitational. So if we assume that maybe the last $1 million and then the additional $1 million came mostly from the Road to 6 Invitational, that makes it $2 million at 30%. So probably $6 million or more from that relatively quick event that was only active on weekends.
Yeah, lucrative. And, there's no pay-to-win element, and it is optional. I would like it if you could buy the individual skins. I always say that, but I mean, if you're going to monetize a game, that is kind of a fair way of doing it,
Yeah.
And the events are always free. Sorry,
I think those paid packs make a lot of money, and that's why we're getting those seasonal events now. They're gonna be raking it in, I think.
Yeah, tying them into events like that obviously is, it makes it so that they sell more of them, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I mean, on the flip side, you get something new, something interesting, like the last event. I think, and I said it at the time, it was very well done. A lot of new added details, a lot of details that I wasn't expecting, the new announcer and all of the new visual effects. And I enjoyed playing that for while it was around. So that's how it works, right?
They really pushed up the quality for that one for sure. Hopefully that'll continue.
It was cool, wasn't it?
Yes. So, next game. Shall we talk a little bit about Ghost Recon?
Mm-hmm.
So we've heard some details about this new Ghost Recon coming out, and I have to say, sort of from the early gameplay I've been saying, it interests me. It interests me quite a bit. It seems grittier than the last one, and sort of more maybe story focused. Well, obviously the last one was predominantly single player and co-op focused as well, with the multiplayer tacked on. Ross, I think you played the last one a bit, right? I remember seeing you stream it for sure.
Yeah, I played the entire lot. I'll love this game. Yeah, I think I'll really enjoy it. But I don't think I'll stick with it for the long term. Just like Wildlands, I'll play it with friends, come back to it every so often. Because the problem I always had with it is the gunplay and the driving always felt a bit rubbish, and it looked very similar in this gameplay they showed off. But I love it. I think it's going to be something I really enjoy.
That's actually a really good point. I remember the helicopters being really weird to control. That's something I remember when I played it, thinking, oh my god, these helicopters, they're dreadful.
Yeah, a good thing about Wildlands is they kept supporting it, they kept fixing it. They did actually make helicopters much more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be good to see what all that stuff they've learnt in the Wildlands going into this new game. I think they could do a very good job. Yeah,
there's a few things that the website for Ghost Recon is telling us about, sort of the story and some of the gameplay elements of the game, and I think maybe we can have a bit of a chat about those. So story-wise, it's taking a new approach, I would say, because up until now, Ghost Recon has always been kind of like counterterrorism a bit and fighting drug cartels. I remember all the way back for Advanced Warfighter, you were fighting in Mexico, and of course the last one was cartels in South America. This time, the main boss or the main enemy, the guy you're fighting, the guy who's in charge of everything, is in fact a former Ghost Recon member.
The Punisher.
Yes, exactly. That actor, that guy.
I feel like I need to play that DLC, because didn't they tie that in with the DLC?
They
So
did,
that in the DLC he's a goodie, and then obviously he's now the main baddie. But he's one of those villains, a bit like Thanos, I guess, in the Marvel universe, where it's like you kind of see it's not like a Tolkien-esque baddie, you know, the Lord of Darkness, and he's just this outwardly evil person. They have this dilemma, you know, this conscious, you know, thing where they, you know, baddies don't think they're baddies, do they? They think they're the good people, you know, they have reasons for what they do. So, yeah.
I've actually not seen this last DLC. Ross, so do you know what sort of the story behind that is and how this character fits in?
The basics of it, I think, are that he is a ghost. His ghost team was killed, I believe, and he kind of blames some of the leadership for that. So I think that's the reason behind him kind of going rogue. But then it gets very fictional with this island is owned by Scale-Tech, or this high-tech company that make drones, and he's somehow taken over this island and this company and is using it to, I don't know, do something. I guess he's going to have probably world domination or something. Like you said, in the past, Ghost Recon games were much more real. Like you could have imagined maybe that scenario happening, whereas this one's a little bit more out there, sci-fi kind of backstory.
I mean, I remember I had the first Ghost Recon games on Xbox, and it must have been around 2003. And I remember you would have a squad with you. It was all like story, but you could move them around. You could tell them where to run, like, if I remember correctly. And then it was set, I think the first story was set in Eastern Europe, and it was about, you know, like, I think there was some problem in Georgia, in Tbilisi, and there was like some civil war, and it was all based around this Tom Clancy, you know, like Cold War sort of story, you know, ultra nationalists they were called.
That rings a bell.
Yeah, that was the first Ghost Recon. You had all these different characters. I remember there was a German one called Munoz, who I really loved. He had like a really good machine gun. But yeah, I just remember them really fondly, the Ghost Recon games from back in the day. And there was a mode called adversarial split screen, and me and my mate used to play, but you could obviously see the screen. So we would run around looking at the floor, so you couldn't see where the other guy was on the map.
Screen watching, there's a concept from way back in there.
Split screen, I mean, you don't think of split screen anymore, really, do you? No. Everything's online these days.
Yeah, Pete, what you're saying there as well. So with this one, there will be no AI teammates. If you're playing solo, you will just be yourself, which is, I think, a lot of the community's against that. They're actually trying to get them to put the AI back in, because that's an interesting choice for them.
That is interesting. I didn't realize that was what it worked. I assumed it would just be like Wildlands, where you have your team anyway, and then friends can jump in or not.
Yeah, they've been replaced with little drones. So if you want to do sync shots, you throw up 3 little drones, and they go out and shoot the people you mark for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the Advanced Warfighter was the one that I played quite a bit, and I remember, Pete, just like you were saying, it was very much grounded, because I remember that a lot of it was in Mexico, and I even remember sort of playing these levels, and this was quite a while ago, back when games were still a little bit, they were still video games, and I was really impressed at the time. I remember Advanced Warfighter, I was really impressed how the maps that you played on, I looked up a Google map, a top-down satellite map for Mexico City, and I could actually find the places where I'd been playing and fighting. And I remember just being blown away by that, because back then that wasn't really a thing. And to just be playing a game and it's like, hey, that fountain thing there and that roundabout, that's where we had this big gunfight and all that stuff. So that's sort of, what Ghost Recon used to be. This one is very far out there. The island that you're on, this archipelago, Aurora Archipelago, is completely fictitious, and very conveniently, it's in the South Pacific, but it has all forms of diverse biomes. So there's snow-covered mountains, there's probably beaches and jungles and swamps. There's, of course, some kind of town or city-like. So very conveniently, you get to fight in all kinds
You've
of
got to, though, haven't
environments.
you, really? You've actually got to have, people want the jungle, and they want the mountains and stuff. I don't suppose... Well, maybe the desert, I guess, but
maybe there are deserts. I would not be surprised.
Yeah, there's desert. There is deserts. Yeah, yeah. These open world games, they've all got to have every biome type with different animals and everything.
And of course, is the island owned by Skeltec? Or are they just based there? Because it almost feels like the main objective of these guys taking over the island is to take over Skeltec.
Yeah, the backstory that's been coming out now, called that past DLCs, kind of the Easter eggs of it all, is that the CEO bought this island. He moved 20,000 civilians, like some of the best minds in the world, there to work on all this stuff, and then this guy's coming and taking it all over and getting them make lots of military drones and stuff. So there will be a lot of civilian areas. There'll be cities as well in this.
Right.
But from the top-down view of the map, it did actually look like there was not... a lot of it was maybe completely empty of any civilization. Maybe quite an empty map. Maybe that'll go into the backstory that these guys are hunting you rather than you just walking around freely. You're actually going to be actively getting hunted down.
How comparable is the size to Wildlands? Do you know?
In the after the stream, they said it was about... I think they said it was bigger, but... Are they taking into the effect
the water?
Yeah. As if the landmass is bigger, then that's cool. But yeah, we'll have to see, I think, when we get a beta for it.
Dude, you could create the world's biggest map and just have it the size of House from Rainbow Six Siege, but just this massive freaking ocean that you can swim around in.
Yeah.
That does not count. It has to be playable.
I have to also say that I'm 50-50 on ultra large maps. You can go too far. I've started to discover. I really enjoyed playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I'm still playing it. But if there's one thing sort of that's where I've dropped off and not played for a week or two, and then maybe come back eventually, it's just that it's so vast, and every new island I go to has these very detailed and very convoluted side quests where there's 5 different stages to it. I go and hunt these boars and then gather mushrooms, and then there's an attack by pirates and I don't know what. So it's just I go to an island which is ages away. I think I've traveled hundreds of kilometers, if not thousands of kilometers in that game so far. And then when you get there, all I want there is to kill this one guy who's a member of the cult. And then I find someone in a market who wants me to just do this thing. I think, okay, it's a quick side quest, and it's not a quick side quest. And literally an entire gaming session later, 4 or 5 hours, maybe even, I'm still on this island gathering mushrooms or something.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to do a massive open world where there is actually content to take part in, rather than it just being empty.
Yeah.
So I do wonder with this if you will be side quests available, or is it going to be pretty empty? You're going to be, because Wildlands was definitely a good size. It felt like you were traveling enough to get around to get to places, but not too far. But I do wonder how they'll do it with this new game.
Yeah, I think for single play, the quick travel is really handy, particularly if you've just got an hour to kill and you want to do a certain mission. I found a lot with Red Dead Redemption, and that is not a particularly big map when you compare it to some of these other games. But I did find I would be going off on one story mission, and then I would get so distracted halfway there. Someone would ask for help, so someone would just attack me or something. And then it's a couple of hours have passed, and I haven't done that story mission that I really wanted to do. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not sure that that's a bad thing at all, because, at least it's keeping you busy and keeping you entertained. I think, like you say there, CoreRoss, it would be much worse if you're just traveling around going, well, I've got bugger all to do in this massive
Red
map.
Dead also took that very risky thing where they didn't have instant travel. You do have to literally ride there, even though you get any cinematic for it. And like you say, it's not the biggest of worlds, but that helps it make it feel bigger without it being huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. It's obviously better to have something there to do. The side quests need to be kind of meaningful for me, though, as well. And I think maybe partially, and I'll say this, it's down to self-discipline in terms of the way you want to play it. And I think something, and I've noticed this in a lot of open world games, even going back sort of to Skyrim and Elder Scrolls Oblivion before then, the way I would play is if I'm in an area, I explore that area and I pick up all these side quests and then gather all these things. And then I go to the next area and I do everything there. And sometimes, like you said, Pete, I'm going there specifically because a mission is sending me there. But then I'm doing all these things there as well. And what it ended up was, as I'm just gathering more and more quests, and then I come to an area and some quests I pick up and some random quests that I've already forgotten about, I'm collecting or killing the right person. And then I come back to the original area and I'm just doing bits by bit. So rather than following through on each story as the quests go, I'm just doing things in an area and then doing things in another area. And it kind of loses the story of the quest, whether they're main quests or side quests. And that is just something that I've noticed for myself, where I just need to become more disciplined and then just stick to a quest, play that quest, and enjoy the story of that quest as I'm going through it, and then pick up the next one, rather than do this maybe more efficient approach, but definitely less fun approach that I kind of fell into.
I think what I'd add to that as well is the repetition of some of these things. I haven't played Assassin's Creed since the second one was in Rome and Florence, right? It was in Italy. And so, it's, I've missed a few, one or two in the last 9 years. But one of the things I found is just how repetitive the missions were. A race, it's all this stuff. And it's like after the first 3 or 4 racing a guy across the rooftops, it's like, Jesus. And particularly because I'm quite completionist as well. I do like to get the most out of it. And that actually sometimes prevents me from finishing a game. And I'm sure there must be other people like that, because you get so completionist. You get to a point where you're actually just kind of bored and you don't really want to play anymore. Whereas maybe if I'd just stuck to the story and weren't looking for all these little Easter eggs everywhere and collecting everything, I'll just get through the game and move on and play another one,
Yeah, I think it's good to point out as well, because we're so focused on Rainbow, but Ubisoft is known, usually for the open world games. It's not, that's their thing these days. And it has been for a while. They've been perfecting it, and they've been doing a good job with, like, Odyssey was probably one of their best open world.
I get that though, CoreRoss, because we're all in our 30s here, and when I grew up, in the 90s and that, it was a dream, an open world game. It was a dream, because games were so linear back then. This idea of having an open world where you could get in a car and drive it around, or get in, that you can in GTA and stuff now, that was just what we used to talk about in the playground at dinner time, Imagine if this happened one day, and there's like so many of them, it's common, which is, Yeah,
it was a completely different experience. I remember also just in investigating these minute little details, like, oh my God, the brake lights work, or something like Perfect Dark, when you have a skybox and there's these little flying cars in the background. It's like, oh my God, you can shoot them. Did you know you can shoot them? Just standing there for half an hour exploring the skybox and silly things like that. That's not how it goes today anymore. And I don't know if that's just me having progressed past this. Like, I'm not at an age anymore where I derive wonder from these details, or whether it's just that games have now become so detailed and almost realistic and all-encompassing that you just go in and it's like, oh, this is the world. I don't need to explore this leaf. I know what a leaf looks like. I don't know. It's hard to say.
What do you guys think about the survival elements?
That's exactly what I was going to get to. And I've had this open on my stream for a while. Sorry if you didn't have our faces. So there are some game details given to us. Live the life of a true ghost stranded behind enemy lines, because that's what happens. Sort of, the island is cut off and the ghosts fly in on a helicopter to just check out what's happening, search and rescue, and then they get shot down, and then they realize, oh, hang on, the entire island has been taken over. So you're basically stranded on this island, you're completely cut off, you're behind enemy lines, and there are a number of interesting systems that the game is using. So first up, there is an injury system. When you take damage, you can become injured. Injuries will slow you down and reduce your combat effectiveness, and they will require additional resources to heal. before you can basically fight normally again. So I think some of the examples they gave were if you get shot, you might develop a limp and you can't really run as fast anymore, and you can only heal up with specific items, and you have to be out of the fight to sort of get that done. And there's other things where you might get shot in the arm and you can't use a long weapon anymore, so you're down to pistols. And it's sort of then becomes a debuff that is active until you can fix it. Interesting. But yeah, Pete, give us your thoughts on this sort of system.
I don't know a great deal about it. I mean, I'd like to hear, because I know CoreRoss has been covering it extensively. What I was working the day they did the reveal, but I managed to catch some of the live stream and that about it, so I'm not really too clued up. It sounds interesting. Sounds like an interesting mechanic. Obviously, I'd like to get hands on, and see how it sort of plays out in action. But CoreRoss, have you got any thoughts on that?
So with Ghost Recon, a lot of the updates they gave, one of the major ones was difficulty, having like a much more intense difficulty and more realistic. So I think that's them playing on that with this now. They're kind of putting it to the next level. It looks cool. It could be, yeah, if you're playing solo, I could imagine it being very annoying if you get shot in the leg and then you just can't run away. But in co-op, I could see this being amazing, picking up your friendlies and running away with them and saving them and stuff like that. Yeah, I could see this being much more intense. And like I say, with Wildlands, they did upgrade the damage, so I think it's just a step up from there. But I've not played that version of Wildlands, so I can't really say how good it would be.
Yeah, like you mentioned, there are a few other things, like there's tough terrain, so you can slip on ice and fall, traversing water will slow you down, wading through snow will slow you, and you sort of leave this track behind. Managing stamina will be essential, so there's a stamina meter or something to do.
Yeah.
You have to regroup in your bivouac, so you have to build a little shelter and a camp, and it's at this camp where you manage your equipment, manage your class, your weapons, everything like that. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, there is also a mechanic where if you're playing co-op, you can grab your buddies and actually just haul them to safety and then help them outside of the gunfight rather than being stuck out in the open somewhere and you can't do anything.
Yeah, so this kind of harps back a little bit to what you were saying a moment ago with regards to, like getting distracted in these worlds. And these things always sound amazing. And as I was saying before, when I was a kid, I dreamed of being able to do all this stuff that was really like reality. But does it become a chore to do this stuff? Do I really want to wade through, snow for 10 minutes or whatever and have to do all this stuff? Because some people actually gave Red Dead Redemption a little bit of stick for that, that they just wanted to play the game and not sharpen every tip of every bullet and
clean your guns.
Yeah,
goddamn, pat your horse. What is it? Clean your horse as well. Otherwise, your horse becomes less effective. There is a very strong argument to be made that if you're not careful with it, if you overdo it, this kind of stuff becomes really tedious. Like, there's only so many times I want to sit there cleaning all of my guns to keep them in peak condition, or brushing my horse to make sure it's happy and stuff like that. And I mean, when I hear manage your stamina, what does that mean? Are you going to be taking drinks every now and then, or do you have to have an inventory with power bars and other items you have to eat? I mean, that would be, I think actually they mentioned, preemptively actually mentioned somewhere that don't worry, you're not going to have to eat every 10 minutes to keep your bars up. But that would kind of be the place where it goes too far and becomes a concern.
That's what put me off with DayZ Standalone. I really enjoyed that game when it was in just, the few months after it released. And then we moved on to Armor mods and stuff, playing DayZ. And then we came back to the Standalone after a good 18 months. And I spawned in and I was just starving straight away and thirsty. And it was like I was just running around and there was no loot anywhere and I died. It was like, all right, I'll go again. And it was like, this isn't fun. This isn't fun. You shouldn't spawn in being starving bloody hungry within 5 minutes, No, thank you. That's a crap mechanic.
I'll tell you what, a lot of this sort of reminds me of, maybe not the injury system, but the terrain and having a bivouac, having the camps basically as the place where you can change your equipment or your class and everything like that. A lot of this reminds me of the direction that Tomb Raider took, especially with the last few games, because there they also brought in more survival elements, and you're constantly gathering resources, twigs and petrol and scrap metal, and you have to hunt animals for their furs and all sorts of things. You're crafting your own arrows all the time. You can craft ammunition from leftover parts. You're building parts of your guns, so you're modifying your guns yourself while sitting down at a campfire. All of this really sounds very much like that. Just sort of the concept of it, at least.
Great to have another job to do. I want a salary if I'm going to be doing all that in the game.
Yeah, it's. I think at this stage maybe we've had enough experience in the industry as a whole, and probably Ubisoft as well, that I'm going to say I'm optimistic and maybe confident that this will be tuned in such a way that it adds onto the game, maybe adds a bit of immersion without becoming tedious, without becoming stupid and boring. But yeah, we'll see when it comes out, I guess.
I'll for sure play that game. I'll for sure play it. It's one of those ones you just know that you probably, you are going to get and going to enjoy. I did enjoy, Wildlands, the bits and pieces I played. The PvP didn't come out with launch. I'm pretty sure of that. It came along. And so PvP is coming out with launch of this game, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's important to maintain in a community, because there's a very, very, important distinction between a single player and a PvP game when it comes to the communities that they embrace and nurture. And obviously, I think it is important that PvP is there from the beginning, because Wildlands never had a massive community. Even on YouTube, you could see there was a community that there wasn't like Siege has, with the PvP element. So it'd be nice if this game had a bit more of that.
I think that's just sort of the nature of games, really. If you have a single-player game, what is there to show,
Exactly.
really? I mean,
100%.
I guess you can make guides on it and optimizing weapons, but it's PvP. But PvE, it's not as important as PvP, where you want every little advantage and where you really want to make sure you're giving yourself the best chance.
And you keep coming back and playing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and these PvP classes as well, they're going to be tying into the single player, so you better play them in both single player and multiplayer, which could be interesting. Going back to the game later and then having a new class you can play the game in might be interesting.
Yeah. I liked what they did with the PvP anyway. I like that you could just blend into the jungle. And
yeah, I was getting to exactly that as well. So the next section on the website is experience full freedom of approach, which... Okay, I'll take that heading as it is. It's not the worst heading on the website, but we'll go with that. And yes, prone blending. Again, I'm going to say Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider is exactly that. The most recent Tomb Raiders, you can as well cover yourself in mud before you go into a stealth section, and it will allow you to sort of blend in and hide Predator style. And we've seen that. That was a big part of the reveal, and it's also mentioned here. Advanced enemy AI. So for the first time ever, you're fighting against a highly organized, highly trained enemy, a former Ghost himself with his men. And of course, they've taken over Skeltec, so they have all this advanced technology to use against you, which I think is going to move this game a little bit even more futuristic than we've seen from Ghost Recon in the past. And then there's also an adaptive cover system, which I think is almost probably going to be something that sort of happens in the background, and you just see it happen rather than it being something that you actively experience. Like, you'll take cover and then you can shoot around cover, and your character will take all of the different positions to be able to lean around or over different bits of cover that you have.
Yeah, I would say that
yeah.
I would say it's not hard to beat the Wildlands AI. They were horrible. So anything that's smarter than them is definitely a good thing.
And that's all the fantasy, all this camouflage and that. When you were kids, did you own toy guns and like camouflage jackets and camo paint, face paint and stuff, and make dens. And
I still own camouflage clothing.
but I mean, you don't run around with a toy plastic AK-47, I should hope. We did. Rarely. But yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Because like video games are basically just an extension of that, for adults, I guess.
I still like dressing up my character, whether it's in The Division or Ghost Recon. Doesn't matter. Yeah, sure. I'll dress him up and give him a beard and stuff like that. Why not? And yeah, I think that maybe the last part here on the website, definitely, and Ross, you've already mentioned this, and this is actually quite interesting, and that is that your character is persistent across all game modes and activities, so whether that's solo, co-op, and even multiplayer. That is interesting, because sometimes you find, or sometimes I find, that when you have a game that is trimmed for solo or co-op experience, that there can be difficulties translating that into multiplayer. I think maybe Far Cry 5 was a decent example of that, because there was a multiplayer and they did try to push that a little while with community-made maps and everything, and you could go in and have sort of a team deathmatch and stuff like that. But the guns, the way they were certainly in Far Cry 5, they really didn't actually work that well, because they weren't balanced, and they weren't balanced on purpose, because they were designed for a single-player game where the further you go through the game, the more powerful the weapons you unlock. But then suddenly you take that into a co-op, not co-op, in a competitive multiplayer, and it's just like, why would you use one of the inferior guns compared to the later game guns that are just available on the ground as well? Because I mean, I remember the very first match I tried, there were all kinds of maybe submachine guns and assault rifles in there, but then this was a player-made map as well, whoever designed that had also put in the suppressed 50 caliber sniper rifle, which was just a one-shot kill. So I just remember one of the first firefights I had was just behind this hill, and I was shooting this guy who was 100, 150 meters away. I had an AK, and I was hitting him. He was wearing body armor, so I hit him, and I hit him again, and I'm hitting him 4, 5, 6 times, and I'm doing well, because you had the ballistic modeling in there, the bullet flight time, and he's popping up and down and moving, and I'm hitting him, and I'm quite happy with myself. I was like, hey, yeah, I'm doing okay. And then he shoots back once, and I'm dead. I was like, oh, yeah, that didn't work. It didn't work then at all. I suppose if you had maps that were designed with only balanced weapons on them, and if you exclude the overpowered weapons, or you group them together so that you have only the ones that match, maybe. But is that a concern for Wildlands at all, that you could have systems that are maybe more geared towards the single-player experience, whether it's the classes or certain weapons, and then bring that into a multiplayer experience?
They could balance it separately, surely.
Well, the whole point of this is that it carries over, right? It's persistent. Over.
I'm hoping they would balance it for PvP and PvE. I don't think you would need to balance it so much, as long as it's still somewhat fun.
Yeah.
Maybe.
The balancing, I suppose, will be done with PvP in mind, and then if there is just one system of damage across the board with your weapons, then you would begin with PvP and then just fit that into PvE or single player.
One other thing that was on my mind as well, and that's sort of the solo versus co-op experience. Now, they mention here that you can seamlessly jump in, jump out, but I wonder how that can really work, because something we've seen with games like this, let's say Far Cry, for instance, where you can play the story on your own, and it's an open world, you can basically go in any direction you want, and you can also have a friend with you. The way they had to do that there is that if you are the person joining the main game, the missions don't actually complete in your instance of the game, but anything you pick up, all the weapons, all the sort of gear and the money you collect and the experience, that does carry over. And that was the only way you could do it, really, because, and I wonder about this here, because it's not really specific, but they do say it's a seamless jump in, jump out co-op. How does it work when you jump into a map where there's missions that you haven't done yet that are already complete? And how does that save to your game? Or is it just completely separate and all you receive is the experience and the weapons and anything you pick up?
Could be on the cloud, couldn't it? You know, something like that. I suspect it may work was it Far Cry, the game we played together, where I was hopping into your missions and I wasn't getting. It was you were progressing the story, not me. So it may be just like you said there, could just be a similar kind of system.
It has to be, right. I was surprised at the sort of wording that they had on the website, where they just call it sort of seamless jump in, jump out, and you complete and store. You complete the story together and you explore together. And I was just like, no, that can't work, can it? It can't.
Yeah, I've had that problem you're explaining with Division 2. I've got a friend who doesn't play as much. And we got so far ahead that when he joined us, he couldn't even play the missions with us. Like I said, no, he's not eligible. He couldn't even come in. So yeah, that could always be an issue, even in a modern game.
I think in the Division 1, if you completed missions in someone else's game, they also completed for you, right?
I think so.
That's how it worked then. But Division 2 is not like that. If
you're playing along with your friend and you're progressing through at the same time, I think it is.
Oh, okay.
But if you get too far ahead, I think that's when it gets a bit messed up.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, they're boasting this as a feature. We'll see if they come up with something more advanced than we've seen so far, or how that will go. But yeah, overall...
What do you think of raids? Do you think that's a gimmick with this game, or do you think it'll be something that people would actually, enjoy as an end game for this?
I suppose the thing is always to at least have an end game, right? Because that was the major criticism of the Division 1, was that it was this sort of co-op focused, multiplayer geared thing. And then the way I played the Division 1 is I played through it, I played the story, I enjoyed it, and then I played a little bit after finishing it, but eventually it's like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. And then I fell away from the game. And I think that was something that a lot of people were maybe disappointed about, going into the game and then playing through the story and then finding, well, certainly before all of the DLC came on, which took, what was that, a year or two of ongoing support. Before then, if you were one of the early players, you played through the game and then you were kind of done. And a lot of people were, I remember, disappointed specifically with that. So what we've seen with now the Division 2 and then this game as well is that there is that sort of at least thought with the developers that we need to make sure that at launch, when people finish this game, if they want to continue, if they want to keep enjoying it, there needs to be something there to hold them there. And then they have the DLC come in. I think, what is it? Every 4 months, there will be seasonal content released for this Ghost Recon, just to keep people then interested over the long term. I suppose I'd have to say it's nice to have them. If I finish the game and I've finished the story and I've enjoyed it and the raids don't really hold me, don't really capture my attention, then that's fine. But for the people who do then enjoy them, it gives you something to do until you wait for the next DLC, especially if it's like every 4 months there's seasonal DLC. What I can see happening is that maybe people finish it pretty quickly and then kind of stop playing, and they then have to restart, come back to it to play the DLC if they even want to at that stage. So having something there to keep you going, to keep you grinding, why not?
It could be like the events in Siege, right? Having a raid come out every period, a brand new raid that you can log in and do cooperatively with friends is similar to, bringing out these events that last for a little while, to keep people interested in ticking along and playing the game. And if the PvP is, really enthralling and people enjoy it, then it's this whole live service model, isn't it? They've cottoned on to the fact that if you can keep people interested in a game, they will keep spending money on whatever they're interested in, just like any hobby, really.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, live service as well. Yeah, this game you need to be online to play it as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how smooth it all goes.
One thing that none of us have mentioned, and everyone's about to roll their eyes. Are you ready? Because I'm going to bring it up. No mention of it. No mention of that game mode, which I'm not going to call by name. Everyone wants.
Does everyone want it? That's the real question.
No, every publisher wants.
But does every publisher nowadays want it? I think we have crested the Battle Royale wave.
I agree,
think we are well on our way down the other side.
I agree.
Certainly I am.
I think Ubisoft will someday do it, but
a separate free-to-play maybe.
It'll be like when it's all dead, then they'll bring it out.
I'd almost say, like, where is Battle Royale now? Look, you look at the Call of Duty Blackout.
Well, Fortnite is still the biggest game about, though.
True. Fortnite is just this weird exception. Like, yes, it is a battle royale, and it's just super duper popular. But you look at these battle royales that have come out since then, Blackout, but look at Firestorm. I think I saw Westy today saying he's making a video on Firestorm dying. And that's he's just an ultra Battlefield fan, and he loves it, and he's been covering the franchise for years and years and years. That's his job, and he's now putting out a video saying Firestorm is pretty much dead. So
we all know that the Battle Royale franchise is oversaturated. There's too many, but we also all know that they're making, like, you know, look what Fortnite's turned Epic into. They've made them so much money that they're starting to try and take over different entire sectors now.
Steam, you know,
yeah, buying publishers, buying games. So even if Ubisoft could get 10% of that, they'd be making absolute tons of money. So I think they'll go for it at some point.
Battle Royale makes way more sense in Ghost Recon than it does Battlefield or Call of Duty or any of them. Like, I could take a Call of Duty about a Battle Royale. Like, I don't want Battle Royale in Rainbow Six, you know, or anything like that. But I think it's just the open world nature of what Ghost Recon has become with Wildlands and now going forth. I could see the sense in it, but I'm not, you know, I'm desperate for it. But
and I suppose though if you're past the sort of hype of Battle Royale games, they are still, they may well still be a good investment because they're relatively low intensity, right? There's no story to develop. There's no characters to animate. There's like, I think for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, was there thousands of hours of voice lines for each of the two main characters, which they basically just did all the work times two. You have none of that. You just have this one map. People jump in over and over again. You have the stuff lying around, and every experience is kind of different and kind of new, and you go for that. Although I think I did hear some rumors that for Firestorm, they had certain patterns, loot patterns and circle patterns, and that sometimes if you were unlucky, you could have the same circle pattern back to back, so it wasn't randomized. And if someone recognized that, they knew exactly where to go for the final circle, and they could already camp it out. That aside, Battle Royale in and of itself, relatively easy to develop and get done. And then once, if it is taken up, if it is accepted and there's a player base for it, you can just play it again and again and again and again. And it is just so much easier to make than a big story-driven game.
Yeah. It's what you alluded to earlier, though. I totally get why people are sick of it, because it strangles out the sort of like diversity of like game types if all these people are focusing on this one thing, and you just happen to be one of the, you know, many people that aren't interested in it. It's kind of annoying.
Well, that's why Ubisoft has announced Ghost Recon now, right? So they can leave E3 just for the Battle Royale, you know. There'll be six titles, all Battle Royale.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, well, if it works and there's an audience for it, why not? Why not? I'm certainly not one who gets super excited by one, but yeah, why not? Anyway, shall we move on to some Game of Thrones?
Yes. May I just say?
Yes, you may.
I had one question I saved for a Q&A.
Go on, have it. That's actually a good idea.
Lucas Farber, question for the Q&A. How do you feel that adding the weapon malfunction mechanic into Siege, like weapon jams, FTF, FTE, FTC, and is remedied by a button or a key sequence, more operator balancing options? I'm not in favour of it.
No.
Just it kind of doesn't suit Rainbow Six Siege, that idea. I mean, maybe like you know, in some of these sort of more realistic military sim type games, I don't know, like Squad, does that have anything like that? Maybe if that has...
I don't think it has, but it may as well. Or is it Armor? Why not?
Armor.
Yep.
Yeah, but I really don't. Could you imagine how cheesed off you would be? Because this random RNG element comes in and your gun jams in the middle of a gunfight or a peak.
And I don't think even the milsims you mentioned have that because of how annoying it would be in a multiplayer game. Even in single-player games, I remember Far Cry 2 had that. You had guns decaying, and they would jam, and they would break, and you'd have to clean them or switch them up and stuff like that. And that was tedious and annoying. I remember that. A lot of people have fond memories of that mechanic. I just thought it was daft. It annoyed me. And that was in a single-player game. Now imagine you're in a multiplayer as competitive as Rainbow Six, and yeah, you die to your gun jamming.
It's interesting. I can see why he came up with it because, you know, it's that sort of realistic thing, you know, having that other thing to deal with. I just don't think it suits this game.
Absolutely not. And you look, we have examples of that. Like guns in real life aren't perfectly accurate. You can literally strap them into a vise and they will the bullets will be like half an inch apart at 100 yards or something. And that's actually already a very accurate weapon. You think about military weapons, which are produced in large numbers and just handed out to hundreds of thousands of people. They're not built to the highest standards, usually, the regular infantry weapons. So the fact is that guns aren't perfectly accurate, but in Rainbow Six, we have perfect accuracy. Because if we didn't, imagine the bullet goes exactly where you aim. Let's put it that way. And a lot of people complained about this in Battlefield 1, where you had that more realistic mechanic where guns were sort of accurate, but not perfectly accurate. And people got annoyed. They thought it was anti-competitive because, oh, here I am aiming at my enemy. I'm aimed perfectly at him, but the bullets are missing at 100, 150 meters because of this RNG element in there. Even though it is realistic, it's annoying. And yeah, in Siege, they've already done away with that. Everything is standardized. The damage of every bullet is standardized. The reload times are down to the millisecond standardized. There's no, you might fumble it or you have to reach for a different pouch or anything. It's just everything is predictable. Everything is meant to be in a very certain, very predictable, very specific and precise way. And even though, yes, jams or any kind of mechanical failures are possible in real life, they just really wouldn't fit Siege. I agree with that.
It'd be a great way to fix the pick rates if their pick rates are too high. You're playing Ash. You're playing Ash too long. You know, your gun starts to fall apart.
There's a whole algorithm,
and not
involved.
Just like it's fixed, but it starts degrading. The more you play Ash, the more her gun, the gun starts gunking up, and then you have to actually go into the menu, take her aside, and she then sits somewhere and cleans her gun. And for 5 rounds, you can't play her because she's at base cleaning her gun.
You have to hold a key down.
Oh, imagine that. That would be horrendous.
Bikini would like that.
Right. Any other questions at all that you had that you wanted to discuss?
That was one I noted from much earlier. I have had questions come in. I've noted them down. Perhaps we can get to it next week if you want to move on.
Or, yeah, either way. I mean, if you have something specifically good or something specifically for Ross.
Some people have been asking, so I haven't got a specific name, but a lot of people have been saying for CoreRoss, why do you think we haven't had a lot of teasers or leaks or really, you know, a lot about the new season? And obviously you really are the man to go to. So have you got any insight into why you think it
I can only assume that they decided to give Ghost Recon a free spot.
Mm-hmm.
Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
They've put Rainbow in second spot. And I think they'll have to either bring out a teaser today, but even then, that would be less than a week of teasers for the new season, which is much shorter.
Yeah.
But they have changed stuff in the past. Like they used to do it 4 weeks of teasers, which was a bit too much. Then they went to 2, and now maybe we'll be going into 1. I don't know if this will be continuing.
Must be something every day this week almost, right?
I would think so. But
well, you get the trailers, you get the map trailer, don't you? Backstory.
Yeah, I think it's usually a map trailer. Yeah, like a little blog post about the map.
Dude, it's cafe though, isn't it? It's not a new map.
Yeah, I still think they'll probably show off a little trailer for it, perhaps.
Maybe they'll
But
keep
who
that
knows?
just for the reveal.
They might do.
But then there's still the 2 operators, and usually there's like a quick teaser, which is just a short video and image, and then the blog post.
Mm-hmm.
So that's at least 4 days already.
And they've started doing like the little backstory things as well. They love their little stories about the operators these days.
Yeah, they do, don't they? They're building that up as well. That's probably what, part of the second game, all this lore that they've gone into.
Yeah.
I expect that'll be a big thing.
Yeah, they even had a backstory for Bandits Elite there, which was
I saw those. Yeah, there was images for all of those. So they had pictures about him arguing with his girlfriend and working on a motorbike and all these things. And like a little thing where he was talking about his dreams to Six, to the new guy.
I thought it looked cool, but I didn't read all that.
Yeah.
I thought it looked good. They did a good job. Not everyone's cup of tea for sure, but I thought it looked pretty badass. That
The Elite itself, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of questions as well, but I'm going to note those down for next week as well, because we do have limited time left. So, if you're not caught up on Game of Thrones, now is your time
Spoilers.
to avert your ears. We shall discuss yesterday's episodes very briefly, just a little bit. So, Ross, you absolutely hated it. Tell us all about it.
So I was telling you before this stream started that I went into this season not expecting much because of like Star Wars prequels, sequels, think TV shows like Lost, like all this stuff that has whole huge amount of hype, all ends up being rubbish. So I went in expecting to be rubbish, and I've liked the last bunch of episodes, but this one, I was like, oh my god, just stupid all the way.
It's funny, I mean...
I want the Night King to come back and kill everyone.
Kill everyone!
Yeah.
I remember having that sentiment in the earlier seasons where I just hated all of the characters, and my one wish was, can they just all die? Literally all of them.
Yeah.
You know what? I didn't mind this episode that much. For one, I was vindicated because I've been calling Daenerys the most evil character in the show for seasons now, multiple seasons, ever since she murdered everyone in the sort of city-states where they had slave ownership, when she murdered all of the slavers. Ever since then, she to me has been the number one most evil character. And there you go, she is. Look at that. She just went totally bonkers in a rather flat-footed way.
That was, she got PTSD from that bell ringing, man. That was traumatic.
Okay.
That's
just paying off our dad, wasn't it? There was the Mad King that wanted to burn it all down, and she went and did it.
Well, I saw, I saw a video on YouTube on the official Game of Thrones channel, and they said it was a series of events that led her to this place, and that it wasn't guaranteed that this would always happen, Rogue, okay? It was the fact that John turned her down in her advances beforehand, and this, that, and the other. And...
I definitely blame John for the whole thing. If he had petty fucked her, then it would have been fine.
Oh, that's bizarre. Like, he's there like, but you're my aunt. How about we don't do this? And she's just like, okay, then fear it shall be. It's like, no, woman, no.
John's literally the last thing she has left. Yeah.
It's actually the Targaryen bloodline. Incest is just an everyday thing. It's just what they do. Yeah, that is just really normal. If you read, I was on the Wikia for Game of Thrones, just reading about all this stuff. It's really how George R. Martin came up with some of these backstories is amazing, really, But I overall quite enjoyed the episode, though I felt a lot of the plot points were really rushed. Her switch over to the dark side, I just felt that happened really suddenly. The way they killed off some of the main characters just like really abruptly after having, Cersei hardly featured in the series. I found the Jaime kind of, it wasn't really a satisfying ending after he went on this redemption story for how many seasons? Then he hooks up with Brianna Tarth, sleeps with her. He's, her first lover that she's ever had, and then he scuttles off back to his sister like some little slime bag.
And we talked about that last week because what triggered that was the news that the fleet had been sunk and one of the dragons was killed, right? That was the news, and then he just goes, oh, I need to go down there. It was that to me just makes no sense. Why that sudden change of heart at that point? Makes no sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that make no sense, because I was okay with this episode overall, but there were just I find almost like the things that make no sense have been creeping in since last season a little bit, and there were a few things here as well. For instance, so Tyrion finds out Jon's true identity. He tells Varys about it and starts the discussion about who do we support? Do we actually still want Daenerys to rule? That was Tyrion that started that whole discussion. Then Varys goes and speaks to Jon, and Tyrion immediately goes to Daenerys and tells on him and gets him executed.
After Varys 2 seasons ago got him out of King's Landing
I don't understand Tyrion's motivation at all there. It is just not explained what he was thinking, why he shared this information in the first place, and then when Varys tentatively explored the opportunity of potentially, maybe in the future.
He was writing out letters. He had that little girl in the soup kitchen poisoning food for him, I suspect. There was no tentative. He was up to some shit. And actually, that might not be the end of that. There could be something that still comes of that. I mean, him writing those.
When he approached Jon, that was all it was just getting his opinion on it, trying to put the case to him that you are the better ruler. That's, to me, that's kind of maybe exploring what could be done if Jon is on board. That was his big betrayal. That was
Come off it, because he is known as the master of whispers. He's this guy that has been, he's always playing the Game of Thrones.
Tyrion doesn't know that. No one knows that.
No, this is a really important point, and I 100% agree with this, because Tyrion went scuttling off to Daenerys and said, my mate that saved my life and got me out of King's Landing. I think but all he saw was he looked down and Jon was just having a chat with Varys, and he could have just been saying, it's a lovely fine morning, isn't it, Jon? And he could have gone, yeah, it's a lovely morning. And Tyrion's like, they're plotting, He could have just been like, oh, good morning, Jon. And then, but Tyrion runs off to Daenerys after seeing them.
And then Daenerys, of course, knew everything already. Away. She knew, just like, oh no, Jon betrayed me. Oh no, it wasn't Jon, it was Varys. No, Jon told his sister, who told you, who told Varys. It's like, how does Daenerys know all of this? She
knew F all, man. Like, I wonder though, because that girl, do you remember that little kid that came and spoke to him? And she said, I'm being watched and that. Yeah. I wonder if he was trying to poison her, because then they said in the next scene that she's not eating at all, which obviously could be, she's devastated because she lost her what's her name, CoreRoss? The lady that was her...
Missandei.
Yeah, Missandei. But it could have been because, she's the threat of, maybe poison or something like that. Because why was he working with that child in the kitchen?
I think at this point, you probably shouldn't be thinking too deep about any of these stuff.
You're right, actually. You're right.
I didn't put two and two together. I'll say that.
Yeah,
and it's just
coming out of anything.
It made no sense. It made no sense for Tyrion to do that when he was the one who shared the information. It's almost as if he purposefully set Varys up. But then why would he do that? And then he stands there, goodbye, old friend. I don't think Tyrion's done
anything smart in like 2 seasons.
It's just...
he's getting dumber.
That made no sense. Yeah. But the next thing that made no sense, okay, I get it that Daenerys is upset and her favorite handmaiden has been murdered and beheaded as a hostage, and she gets angry, and then she sees this surrender, because the surrender was arranged, and the bells are ringing, and all of the soldiers are putting down their weapons. And I guess, I understand this, she may see this as her being robbed of her opportunity to get revenge on Cersei for killing her handmaiden and all that. But then she's sitting on a dragon and she has the opportunity to just, everyone's put down their weapons, everyone's surrendered. She can just fly to the Red Keep and burn it down or kill Cersei in whichever way. But then she decides instead She's going to just fly backwards and forwards, destroying the entire city for no tactical advantage or reason at all.
Beyond redemption now. She is beyond redemption. She's not a good person. She's literally... Do you know what I mean, though? You know, the stuff before in Slavers Bay and Marine and stuff, you could argue, well, there's some twisted logic and, you know...
Rogue's just happy that he was right.
Yeah, but the thing is that, you know, kids, you know, just civilians were just being turned to crisp. You know, it was just, she is beyond redemption now. And I just want to say one quick thing, right? We're all expecting John to kill her and take the throne, you know, the reluctant king or whatever.
You know,
right?
I'm worried.
The whole thing is they're putting in. We spoke before we went live, and they're now putting in these twists for the sake of having a twist. But to the point where, as a viewer, because they do all this foreshadowing, hinting at something to come, which doesn't come because then they put in a twist to subvert expectations. But it's not satisfying. It's not a satisfying conclusion when the foreshadowing is hinting towards something and something else happens. So I bloody well hope that John does take the throne. It isn't just this weird twist where she just kills everyone off and like there's this really unhappy ending that everyone keeps saying it's Game of Thrones. Of course, it'll be an unhappy ending. If it is, I'll be mightily peed off.
I've seen her as one of the truly evil characters all the way along. I've explained it before. So her being out for blood, I get that, but like there is no tactical advantage to what she did, and even it makes no sense considering that earlier in that very episode she was saying, I understand that they're hostages, but if they need to die in order to not be so that there can never be any future hostages, then I will make that sacrifice. So she was already willing to sacrifice the people in order to defeat Cersei and make sure that there is peace going forward for all the rest of the people and for future generations. But then she didn't have to destroy the city, and she still did.
Her motivation is her own power. That is her motivation.
But that doesn't even make her powerful. That just makes her hated now.
No, because she knew she would never win them over. She knew that, like, the King's Landing, she wouldn't be welcome. Like, she's, you know, Dothraki, the Unsullied, in some of the places where she freed out in Slavers Bay, maybe she would be a welcome queen, but she's never going to be welcome in King's Landing with their elite and, you know, the politics that goes on there. So she just will sod it. But the thing is, she, you know, like I said, she's irredeemable, and she only sought power for herself. Like, she could say, you know, like, it's about freeing people and not having tyrants anymore so people can live free. But this kind of harps back to what we were talking about earlier on when we were talking about video games, where you have a baddie, but they're not just the Dark Lord. How bloody boring is that? They think that they're the good person, right? But they're absolutely despicable. You know, you take any dictator, they probably do. It's like that, was it Peep Show scene? And it's two German officers during World War II. And they say, and he turns around and he goes, "Are we the baddies?" Yeah, you are.
Yeah, and what an unsatisfying end for Cersei and Jaime, I thought. Well, maybe they aren't dead.
Do you think they are actually dead? Yeah.
Maybe they're not even...
That would piss me off, though.
It would piss me off too.
It would piss me off. I'm sick of that. Like, oh, is he dead after that fight? Oh no, it's like, I'm sick of it. You know, we don't need, you know,
they
like
kind
that
of did a
fight
little
on
bit
the
of a
beach
fake thing with Arya as well, where she's getting trampled, and you just have this like 20 seconds of her getting trampled. She can't get up, and then just some random woman comes and picks her up. That was it.
It is tedious because they're doing it too much now. We're doing that too much. But there was just like, I sound really negative. I overall quite enjoyed the episode. You know, I liked, as I said to you before we went live, I liked the fight between the Mountain and the Hound. I thought that was quite cool. A bit weird, but, you know, the death, you know, the joint death. It felt like his mission, he'd achieved, you know, what he wanted. He got his vengeance, you know?
Yeah.
And he went down into the flames.
Which is then that also obviously links back to how he got his injury when his brother burnt him in the fire. And I suppose now he gets to burn him back and also himself.
Yeah. So it's kind of, that was quite good. And the Tyrion Jaime bit, as I said, I liked that.
Now what happens to him? He's dead. Like, Tyrion's going to get murdered instantly. Daenerys is a complete loony, and he's betrayed her.
Is she going to know that he did that?
Yeah, of course.
Well, all she knows, Jaime got smoked by a dragon or something. She doesn't know.
He was captured. He was captured within their lines. He wasn't in the city.
Yeah, but how does she know that Tyrion? I mean, obviously, it could be quite easily explained who.
There were guards there.
Tyrion turns up. That were guarding them. Yeah. So
guards there. Tyrion turned up and said, "Go away," and they went away.
She has to end it dead. As far as I'm concerned, she needs to be dead.
I'll tell you what, one side effect of all of this is that, like, for me, Jon Snow was always kind of a wimp because of his attitude of, I don't want the responsibility, I don't want the power, even though from almost the very beginning, he's been the best suited person to actually take power. When all of these spoiled brats are fighting for power and they all have a claim to the throne and that's all they want because I was born with certain surname, therefore I deserve the power. He was the only one in all of those who just like, no, I don't want any of this. But he did that before, and he didn't want to.
Yeah, I would say his indecision makes him just as bad as the bad people. Yeah,
because that annoyed me beforehand, before he became King of the North, and eventually, then he did take on the role, and he becomes King of the North, and he does something good, and then he gets murdered for it. And it seems almost now he's come back, and it's like, he's gone back to his old self. He is the right person. He could have stopped this. He could have stopped Varys being killed. He could have done anything beforehand, and he didn't.
And that Varys stuff was pretty brutal, weren't it? I mean,
of course,
just blown away by a dragon. I mean, jeez.
And that's kind of now made me like Jon less again, because he's kind of responsible for this. He chose to share the secret, so he kicked all of this off. Whether or not, obviously, I mean, Daenerys is blaming him. It's your fault. You did it, and therefore you're responsible for Varys' death. No, she's responsible for having him executed by a dragon. But still, it's just the writing was on the wall. She wasn't a good person, and she was out for power. The minute she realized the truth and saw her power threatened, she tried to sort of, maybe it's not true. It was your friend and your brother who told you this. Oh, if it is true, then let's keep it a secret. So she's desperately trying to establish and maintain her power. And he didn't see it. And this is like, she's my queen. It's like, no.
Tyrion was like that.
Yeah, before we started the stream, I told you what my perfect outcome for all this is that Arya dies. She ends up actually coming back as the Night King because she got touched earlier. And it just kills everyone. Just want everyone to die. And the Night King to be the hero. And he'll be the prince that was promised and actually saves. Because the human race in this freaking thing are just the most horrible aspect of this.
The aristocracy, for sure. I mean, you can't really blame the normal people.
Yeah, maybe not. But if they all got into power, they'd all be just as bad, eh?
I guess, maybe.
I was wondering right at the end, because they had that really long scene where Arya gets out of the ash, and she's completely white with ash. She sees a white horse, and I wonder if that was like, because it did look very Night Kingy, but I don't know. So I do wonder what will happen in the last episode. You know, they have to kill. They have to kill most people off and do all that.
Who's alive then? Who's alive? Who wasn't featured yesterday? That's alive. So you got the big ginger guy from the Wildlings. I forgot his name.
He left. They've gone back to the north.
Okay, Brienne.
Yeah, might not see him again.
She's alive. Sansa.
Yeah, they're still.
Sansa has to have a big part in it.
What's his name? The Bram.
Yeah.
He's still about.
Yeah, Arya's still there. She's in King's Landing.
Well, Arya's going to try and kill her, and then she'll die, I think, for sure. But I don't think she'll be successful, obviously. I think she'll get probably burnt by the dragon.
And then maybe Jon will finish her because, you know, she killed his sister. So that's quite a good shout there.
Daenerys is definitely going to turn on Tyrion for sure, whether he gets away or not. And she's going to turn on Sansa. So what Jon does there, does he maybe stand by until it's too late and then he does something? I'd expect that of him at this point.
I think she's definitely going to have to try and burn him with a dragon, and he lives just like she did. I would expect that to be. But again, I don't know if the writers are going to put any of this. Like, it's going to be completely random. There's just been our spin, and it'll go a completely different way, and it'd be horrible. Yeah.
Bron's another one.
Yeah.
He's been out of it for ages now.
He was promised, what was it, High Garden?
He was in the last episode, right? He confronted Jaime and
showed up,
Tyrion with the crossbow and said, "Your sister sent me to kill you. You have to pay me something higher."
Season before. That episode before. He wasn't in yesterday's. He was the one before that.
That's what I meant. Yes.
Yeah. So, he's been offered High Garden. He's like, it's like just offering someone.
But he can't get that now because she's dead. So, it's just silly.
We shall see. Yeah, it's been odd. I almost feel like the last 2 seasons, is that when they started outstripping the books? Because I just feel sort of there was a point when suddenly things started happening that didn't quite make as much sense as they used to. Like I remember last season when they went to capture an undead, and they're traveling. It feels like days. They're traveling through this snowy wilderness beyond the wall, and then when they get trapped, one guy was at the blacksmith, runs back to get help, and on foot, before they were on horses and they were traveling forever, and then on foot he just runs back and gets help within half an hour or something. It's just like, how?
Yeah, and the travel times are horrendous.
That's not something that has happened before these last 2 seasons, I feel, which is maybe a bit of a shame.
They've got to wrap it all up in one episode. So
I've seen that a lot of TV shows where distance doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah. Now we've already lost the Night King, and all of that big menace is gone. Now Cersei is maybe not gone. Possibly.
Gone.
I hope she's gone. She should not have survived that. That was like tons of stuff.
Yeah. Even if they dig her out, I think she's going to then be killed if she survived somehow. I don't think that.
I was going to say, what if they did to her what they did to the Mountain, but he got a bit unceremoniously done in, didn't he, that fella? Christ almighty. Do you see how the Mountain did him in? He was like, smashed his bloody head open.
See, I like that. I like that it's unceremonious and it's just sort of happens. Like, I was half almost expecting something like that with Arya when she's in the city, because that whole thing of her getting trampled to death, and it's like, oh, come on, really? But then just stuff just happening, because they've fallen away from that as well. Game of Thrones has been known for just targeting the main characters ruthlessly. And yet sort of you look at this, certainly this last season, maybe the last 2, whenever there's a main character that goes, there's always a big scene around it. And then does he or doesn't he? Maybe yes, maybe no. And that's sort of the guy sort of, listen to your queen, and just grabs him by the face, throws him down the stairs, and his head cracks open. And it's like, oh, okay. And that just sort of, because that then takes the main characters and just binds them into the world. It's like they are just people in the world as well, and anything could just abruptly happen. And I almost feel that with all the other main characters, it's not that anymore. It's just become another TV show where the main characters are lifted above everyone else in terms of just plot armor and sort of the way they're characterized when they do go. It's I don't know. I wonder if it is because they went beyond the books and they're now making it up. Who knows? But we should see next week, I guess.
So with that, how it ends.
Yeah. With that, we have gone 2 hours. Pete, do you want to quickly do a little bit of Pro League stuff?
I think we'll call it there if you don't mind, because I've got to run some chores and stuff. So.
Fair enough. If you want Pro League news, there's the ESL website. You can see who's playing this weekend. You can see who's been relegated.
Do tune in this weekend, though, because obviously it's going to be fun. And on top of that, you're going to see the reveal. The whole schedule is you can get it on the Ubisoft website as well. So it will be worth tuning in.
Yeah, and if you are going to Milan in person, wave if you see me, because I'll be there as well.
Sweet.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ross, for joining us today and having some discussion with us. Great seeing you. And yeah, like I mentioned before, youtube.com/CoreRoss or 6 News, whichever one, which I'm sure everyone knows already. And with that, thank you everyone for watching and listening today, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
See you later. Bye.